They met frequently, and their bond began to grow so strong. Obinna was completely captivated by Amaka, who skillfully positioned herself as the ideal partner for him, capable of producing an heir who would one day take over from him. He gradually warmed up to the idea, and one evening, over a lavish dinner, he asked her to be his wife, promising her a life of luxury and comfort. Amaka, without wasting any time, accepted to be his wife, her mind already plotting the next steps of her revenge against Amara, who had no idea that her action the other night had sparked a revenge plan which would ruin her life forever. Amaka sat in her room, worried that things were not going as planned. Her younger sister was getting married in a few days, and Amaka could not understand why she was still single at her age. She remembered how she used to dress her younger sister up for school every morning, and now she was getting married before her. Is it that I am cursed? Amaka thought to herself as she heard a loud knock on her door. It was Amy, who had come to show her the dress that her tailor had just dropped off for her traditional wedding. "Sister Maka, how do I look?" Amy asked her sister, who could not contain her joy. Her precious little one, as she fondly called her, was getting married, and Amaka, although sad and worried, was so happy to see Ami all grown up and ready to be married. Ami's husband-to-be was a very wealthy and respectable man who met Ami during her graduation ceremony. He was the brother of one of Ami's friends, who took an interest in her during the graduation event. Would you blame him? Ami was such a beauty to behold. She was an extremely brilliant girl who graduated with a first-class honor in law and also emerged as the best graduating student from her department. She was so brilliant that she got admission into the university by the age of 14 on a scholarship that was applied to by thousands of people. Not only was she brilliant, she was also an exceptional cook who made the best dishes. Shika was captivated by her and had to make her his wife. Amaka could not. Amaka couldn't help but compare herself to her younger sister, who seemed to have the life that she so desired. Amaka struggled most of her life, as she was not as brilliant as Ami. She had so many carryovers in university, and even had to spend an extra year trying to clear all her outstanding papers. Unlike Ami, who was so homely and kind, Amaka was the complete opposite. She hated to cook and never saw a reason why a woman should cook for her home when she could have a chef or just buy food from the local restaurant. The last time Amaka tried to cook a local delicacy to win the heart of a man, he ended up spending days in the toilet. So Amaka decided that it was best for her to stay away from men who expected her to cook as a wife. She was rather focused on attracting a rich man who would be able to pay for the services of a chef, as Amaka could not stand the thought of cooking and doing domestic chores in her husband's home. All the men who came her way were either poor or struggling, and Amaka did not hesitate to turn down their advances. She hoped to find a rich man at her sister's wedding, as Chuka was not only rich but well-connected. She picked up her phone and called her tailor to confirm if her dress was ready, but the tailor was not picking up her call. The wedding was 2 days away, and Amaka could not risk being let down by her tailor. So she hurriedly left her home and went to the tailor's shop to ensure that her dress was ready. When she arrived at the shop, she saw the tailor holding her fabric in her hand, unsewn. Amaka could not hold back her anger. "Is this not my fabric?" she said, as Ife quickly pulled out her scissors and began to cut the fabric. Amaka fumed in anger as she watched Ife cut and sew her dress bit by bit. After several hours, a young woman walked into the shop and asked the tailor for her clothes. Ife told the woman that her clothes were almost ready, and that she would finish them up once she was done with the dress she was working on. The young woman fumed. In anger, she grabbed onto Amaka's dress and dragged it away from the sewing machine, ripping the dress in the process. Amaka landed her a dirty slap as they both jumped on each other and began to fight. They threw several punches. Amaka grabbed the woman's braids and began to pull with all of her strength. She held on to the braids firmly, pulling some out by the roots. Unable to bear the pain, the woman ran away from the scene, promising to teach Amaka a lesson. "You cannot do more than a dead rat," Amaka replied to the angry woman as she turned to look at the others, who apologized for what she had done. After a few hours, Amaka's dress was finally ready. Amaka packed up the dress and headed home. It was already dark, so she boarded a bike and headed straight for her house. She had promised to help her mother label the wedding souvenirs and had to be home soon. They drove for a few minutes and approached a lonely road that led to Amaka's house. A car seemed to be driving aggressively towards them, and Amaka, fearing for their safety, told the bike man to hasten his speed. She looked to see who it was and saw the woman she fought a few hours ago. Amaka knew that she was in grave danger. The angry woman chased them for a few minutes as the bike man drove at the top of his speed. "Madam, we go die this night too," he said to Amaka, who rebuked his statement. Just as they were about to make a turn, the angry woman caught up with them and hit them off the road. She reversed her car and drove off before anyone caught sight of her. Amaka struggled for her life as she managed to yell out for help. A young man heard her cry and rushed to help her to the hospital, where she finally passed out. Unfortunately, the bike rider did not survive, as he hit his head on a stone and died instantly. Amaka woke up a few hours later to realize that her face had been badly bruised. She also had a minor dislocation and was unable to move her right leg. Her doctor, Dr. E, came into the room to inform her that she was lucky to still be alive. He told her that the minor dislocation in her leg would be fixed in a few days. However, the bruise on her face was going to take months to heal. He told Amaka that she had to remain in the hospital for a few weeks for the nurses to monitor the scar to avoid any form of infection. Amaka could not believe her ears. Her sister's long-awaited wedding was only a few hours away, and she could not believe that she was going to be absent. Her plans of meeting her rich husband at the wedding were now distant from reality, and Amaka burst out in tears at the thought of this. Dr. E, seeing her in distress, tried to console her. "Amaka," he said gently, "sometimes life has a way of redirecting us when we least expect it. Take this time to heal both physically and emotionally." Amaka nodded, though her heart was heavy. As she sat there, she reflected on everything that happened and vowed to take revenge. Her sister walked into the room and met the doctor, who updated her on her sister's condition and stood next to her sister, reassuring her that everything would be fine. Amaka could not have asked for a better sister. She could see the worry in her eyes as she offered to sleep by her side all night. "Your wedding is tomorrow, and you need to be well rested for the occasion. You should return home and sleep, as I promised to look after myself. I am sorry I won't be there by your side. Just know that I'll be there in spirit." Tears dropped from Amaka's eyes as she looked at her sister's face, which was now badly scarred. She spent a few minutes at the hospital and returned home to rest for the wedding. The next morning, Amaka's friend Uni came to the hospital and was so furious to hear all that had happened. She told Amaka that they had to find the woman who put her in this condition to ensure that they make her pay. Amaka told Uni that her sister knew who the woman was, as that was where she met her. Uni promised to do her investigations to find out who this woman was and where she lived. She spent a few hours with Amaka and was told to leave by the nurses as visiting hours had now come to an end. The next day, her sister returned and informed Amaka that the woman behind her accident was the wife of OB, an oil tycoon who was well known for his vast wealth. He was the youngest billionaire in the state to own several companies and oil wells around the country. His wife, Amara, was a troublesome woman who went around oppressing people because she believed that her husband's money could get her out of any trouble. Rumor has it that OB Naude was in search of another wife as his wife Amara failed to give him a child. Amaka was so delighted to hear this. She plotted her revenge on how she would win OB Naude's heart. He was obviously rich and everything she had ever wanted in a man. Amaka was willing to become his second wife to teach his wife, Amara, a lesson. She was, however, concerned that OB Naude would not find her attractive because of the scar on her face. "I would use makeup," she said to her friend Oni, who told her that she had a plan. Oni informed Amaka of a very powerful prophet who could make anything happen. She told Amaka that the prophet could help her remove the scar on her face and even make her path cross with that of OB Naude. Amaka was glad to hear the news. She was, however, skeptical of the prophet's powers. But Oni convinced her that there was nothing diabolical about the prophet, whose powers were natural as he was born with them. Later that day, Dr. Iki walked into her room to check on her scars. "They are healing beautifully," he said to Amaka, who told him that she wanted to be discharged. Dr. Iki warned her against doing so, but Amaka was so adamant as she could not wait to put her plans in motion. Dr. Iki, seeing her persistence, told her that he would only agree to discharge her if she permitted him to drop by her house once in a while to check on the scar, and Amaka agreed because she was so desperate to leave. The hospital processed her discharge papers, and Amaka left the hospital. After a few days of being admitted, the dislocation of her leg had healed. All Amaka was worried about now was the scar on her face. She arrived home and met her mother, who was preparing to come visit her at the hospital. "How are you, my daughter?" she asked. Amaka assured her mother that she was fine. She walked into her room, her mind flooded with thoughts of sweet revenge. Amaka waited patiently till the next morning and then headed to An's house. They had made plans to visit the prophet that morning. But for some reason, heavy rain began to fall with scary thunderclaps that made it impossible for them to visit the prophet later that evening. When Amaka returned home, she met Dr. E, who had been waiting for her for hours. He could tell that something serious was bothering Amaka and convinced her to talk to him. But Amaka, unable to divulge her plans, assured him that she had everything under control. Dr. E found it hard to believe but decided not to press further. As he examined her scars and left her home, Amaka retired to bed and heard a knock on her door. It was her mother, who looked terrified. She told Amaka that she had a terrifying dream where her entire body was rotten and maggots were eating deep into her skin. She told Amaka to remain home the next day to fast and pray to God to avert the plans of the evil ones. But Amaka informed her mother that she already had something planned with her friend Oni. "And this your friend Oni, I do not like her around you," she said to Amaka, who assured her mother that Oni was not a bad friend as she assumed. Her mother returned to her bed to sleep, as Amaka stayed up awake, unable to shake off her mother's dream from her mind. By morning, Oni came to Amaka's house to pick her up. Amaka told her of her mother's dream, and Oni convinced her that dreams were a reflection of one's fears. She assured Amaka that her prophet was not an evil man, as she had consulted him on several occasions, and nothing evil had happened to her. Trusting her friend Oni, Amaka followed her to go meet her prophet, who seemed to know why she came without her even speaking. He handed her his special miracle soap, which she was to use to wash her face every night for 7 nights, saying that after the 7th night her scars will